So as Richie said, this is a new initiative for our center. This is new work for me. Up until a few years ago, I had no experience working with law enforcement populations. I think my path toward carrying out this work really started several years ago in the summer of 2014. So I grew up in North St. Louis County. I went to high school about 5 minutes away from Ferguson, Missouri, which is a location of a police shooting of an unarmed black teenager in the summer of 2014. And looking at TV and watching images on the internet of my hometown and seeing members of the community being treated by police officers almost as enemy combatants, these police officers in riot gear and driving in armored vehicles, just really broke my heart. And it was really difficult for me to watch. And I show this picture and tell this story not to condemn the police as an institution and not to condemn these individual officers. This role is unfortunately one of the roles that we have, as a society, have decided that law enforcement should fulfill. And now, in many ways, we're dealing with the consequences of that. But there are many other roles that police officers also fulfill in our society. So these men and women act as emergency responders, mental health professionals, family counselors, and social workers. We've failed to provide, as a society, many basic and critical services for some of the most vulnerable members of the society. And as a result, police officers have duties cast upon them that go far beyond a narrow definition of law enforcement. So in short, we really ask these men and women to bear witness to the worst of violence in humanity, and it should not be surprising that this has a lot of negative consequences for these individuals. So police officers as a group have elevated rates of a number of different stress-related health conditions. This includes cardiovascular disease, sleep disorders, depression, PTSD, and alcoholism. And these conditions have negative consequences that go beyond these officers. So officers who are stressed, anxious, or burned out are less likely to act with compassion, kindness, and discretion in their interactions with others. And if we can provide officers with tools to enhance the resilience to these inevitable stressors of their work, this can have widespread consequences for the well-being of the whole community. So with this as background, we started carrying out work with the police department in Madison, Wisconsin 2 years ago on a training program that's intended to reduce the effects of stress in police officers. So we worked with a group in Oregon that had developed a version of the 8-week MBSR program that Melissa just described, and this was a version that was adapted specifically for police officers. My collaborators, Chad, who's in the audience, and Chris, developed a version of this training that they then delivered to 2 different groups of 15 officers. So in addition to formal sitting meditation practice and walking practices, this training also involves informal practices, so ways to bring this training into the daily lives and activities of these officers. And really importantly, this training, we emphasize, this is more than just about reducing stress in officers. We're also working to cultivate traits in these officers that we believe can be of benefit both to them and also with all of those that they interact with in their work. So first off, mindfulness provides officers with tools that can provide them greater stability in the face of daily stress, trauma, and suffering. Secondly, we hope that these practices will allow officers to maintain a clear mind in the face of intense emotional situations and to exercise ever greater levels of wisdom and discretion. And also in this training, we talk about what might be an uncomfortable word for some of these individuals, which is compassion. We invite officers to exercise compassion for themselves, and through that we hope that they can cultivate greater compassion for those that they interact with on a daily basis. And in this work, we're really following in the footsteps of giants. Sherry Maples was a tireless advocate for social justice throughout a career with the Madison Police Department and also in a lifetime of service and activism. She brought Thich Nhat Hanh to Madison in 2002 for a meditation retreat and really helped plant the seeds within this department that allowed this work to blossom 15 years later. So early data from this initial study suggests that this training is leading to reduced stress and anxiety in police officers, decreased symptoms of PTSD, and also less burnout. I'll just share one data slide here, which is for self-reported sleep quality. So before this training started, many of our officers had impaired sleep. So 23 out of 30 officers in the group met the cutoff for poor sleep quality on this gold standard self-report measure of sleep impairment. After the training program was complete, only 14 of the officers met that cutoff, and we saw a large and significant decrease in levels of disrupted sleep. And this is a really important outcome for a few reasons. So as many as 40% of officers are likely to have sleep disorders, and there are negative consequences that extend far beyond these officers. So research has shown that officers who have impaired sleep are much more likely to make errors at work. They're more likely to express anger towards citizens, to receive complaints from citizens, and also to be absent from work. So this illustrates the potential very broad impact that could be realized by this intervention if it's able to improve sleep quality or other stress-related conditions in police officers. So this was the initial stage of this work. After carrying out this pilot study, we received funding from the Federal Department of Justice to carry out a much larger randomized controlled trial that is ongoing. So this is a randomized controlled trial of mindfulness training in 120 police officers from 3 different Dane County agencies. And in addition to self-report measures of sleep and other well-being outcomes, we're looking at objective sleep quality and heart rate using Fitbit activity trackers. We're also looking at other objective behavioral and biological outcomes. And finally, we're starting to look at some additional outcomes that speak to the impact of this training beyond just these individual police officers. So a lot of our early research has really focused on individual officers' well-being, but I believe that this training has the potential, as I've spoken about, to spill out beyond individual officers, to start affecting the relationships with loved ones, with coworkers, to start having an impact on the interactions that they have in the community, and eventually we hope to benefit the well-being of the community as a whole. So with that, just a lot of gratitude to all of the individuals who have helped with this research, and our funding sources, the Institute for Clinical and Translational Research at the University of Wisconsin, and also the Federal Department of Justice.